It all started with a strange noise. I remember the first time I heard it at 2 a.m. in the dead of night. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, thick and suffocating. I lay there in the dark, eyes wide open, straining to catch anything. Then it came, a faint, eerie whisper, just on the edge of hearing, like someone was standing in the next room, just out of sight. My pulse quickened, a chill running down my spine. Sandra, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Did you hear that? She didn't stir. She never did when she was pretending to sleep. Just that stillness, like the world outside had stopped turning. I told myself it was nothing. The house settling, a draft, maybe, but the whisper came again, more distinct this time. Clearer. My heart hammered against my ribs. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. I shook her gently, but she rolled over, mumbling something about just the house. I was skeptical at first, but over the next few weeks the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, more persistent. Sometimes I could swear I heard footsteps, doors creaking open when no one was there. But Sandra, she was convinced. It's the house, Lucas. You feel it too, right? I know you do. It's not just me, she said one night, sitting at the edge of our bed, her eyes wide, her voice trembling as if she truly believed it. I hadn't wanted to believe in ghosts, but when you're with someone who's sure of something, who drags you to ghost hunters and sits you down in front of their cameras, you start to wonder. We got a couple of so-called experts. They showed us their gadgets and told us how the house sat on an old burial ground, but I wasn't buying it. Still, I stayed silent. For her. For us. What I didn't know was that Sandra was playing me. Every night, every sound, every whisper. It was her doing. I never thought she could go this far. Never thought she'd manipulate me like this. But then it all unraveled. It wasn't a moment of clarity that led to the discovery. It was pure chance. I was up in the attic going through old boxes, cleaning out what I could. That's when I found it, a dusty, forgotten recorder buried under old tapes and papers. At first, I thought nothing of it, but then curiosity got the best of me. I pushed play. The faint static crackled to life, followed by a low, eerie whisper, but then I froze. There, underneath the crackling sound, I heard it, Sandra's voice, soft, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. She was whispering to someone. My stomach turned. My hands shook as I turned the volume up. It sips all in place. I heard her say, her voice cold and calculating. Lucas will believe this is real. He shall never question me again. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. This wasn't a ghost. This was Sandra. She had been using this recorder to fabricate every single sound, every eerie moment that had left me awake at night. She was playing me, using my fear against me. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced as I stood there in the attic, listening to the tape over and over. I wanted to confront her, but I didn't know how. My entire world was crumbling. When I walked downstairs, my legs felt like lead. I could hear the low hum of the kitchen light above me, the soft scrape of her chair against the floor. She was in the kitchen, sitting with her back to me as always. The tape recorder sat innocently on the counter between us, like it didn't hold the key to every secret she'd buried. Sandra, I said, my voice barely a whisper, shaking with anger and disbelief. She turned, her face pale, eyes wide. She saw the tape in my hand. What are you talking about? She said, feigning confusion. I hit play, and her confession echoed through the room. At first she didn't move. She just stared at the recorder, the color draining from her face. Then came the cracks. The mask fell. I never wanted it to get this far, Lucas, she said quietly, her voice trembling as the confession played. But I needed it. I needed to keep you here, to keep you close. I was losing you, and I couldn't handle it. I didn't know what to say. The words stuck in my throat like I was choking. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved for all these years had orchestrated this nightmare. And for what? Control? Power? Her own twisted security? I thought if I could make you believe, if I could make you scared, you need me. She continued, her eyes starting to well with fake tears. I was terrified of losing you, Lucas. This was the only way. I stared at her, stunned. I couldn't even bring myself to speak. How could she do this to me? To us? You used me, I said, the words finally coming out, barely above a whisper. All these months, all this time, and it was you? You manipulated me? Yes, she said, her voice shaking, the guilt and relief mixing in a twisted confession. I stopped sorry, but please understand, I was desperate. I was numb. I didn't know what to feel anymore. Betrayal, hurt, confusion. They all hit me at once, suffocating me. I couldn't stay there, not with her standing in front of me, pleading for my forgiveness. Not after everything I had just learned, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. This was it. The house wasn't haunted. Sandra was, and I had to make sure she paid for it. The silence between us stretched on, like I was in some kind of dark vacuum. I couldn't trust her anymore. I couldn't look at her the same way. But I wasn't going to let this slide. Not after everything she'd done. This wasn't just about a haunted house anymore. It was about justice. My life, my peace, my trust. All of it had been shattered. But I wouldn't let her break me. She had manipulated me for far too long, and now it was time to turn the tables. This was only the beginning. I don't know when the numbness started to fade. Maybe it was when I found myself sitting at the kitchen table hours later, the silence between us suffocating. The recorder, that damn recorder, still sat on the counter. Every time I glanced at it, my blood boiled all over again. But the hardest part was, I didn't know what to believe anymore. Was everything we had a lie? Every word she said, every touch, every promise she made, was it all part of the manipulation? I had lived a life with Sandra, built a future, a family, a home. But what did that even mean now? My mind kept racing in circles, trying to piece it all together. For months I had convinced myself that something supernatural was happening in the house. I had convinced myself that we were both victims of some invisible force. But no, it was her. It was Sandra all along. I could still hear her voice from the recorder. I needed to keep you close. I was losing you. And then it hit me. The horrible truth, the haunting wasn't something outside of us. It was a part of her. Sandra had built this whole web around me, pulling me into her world of fear and paranoia, and I was none the wiser. I replayed the confession over and over in my head. Each time it felt like a fresh punch in the gut. Every night we'd spent together in terror, every sleepless hour, every time I'd turned to her for comfort, she had used all of it to control me. And the worst part was, she had succeeded. For a while I had been completely blind to it. She had turned me into her puppet, and I didn't even know it. I didn't say anything to her for hours. I just sat there. I couldn't look at her the same way. How do you even begin to confront someone you thought you knew? How do you face the woman you trusted with your entire life when you realize she's been lying to you from the start? Eventually, she spoke. Her voice was soft, pleading, trying to draw me back into the web of lies. Lucas, please, I know what I did was wrong, but you have to understand. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't set know how else to keep you. I stared at her. The woman I had loved. The woman I had stood by through thick and thin. I had sacrificed for her. I had put her first. And now I felt like I had been suffocated by her lies. You didn't know how else to keep me? I asked, the words cold and bitter. By lying to me? By making me believe I was losing my mind? She flinched at the edge in my voice. But she didn't stop. I thought, if I could make you believe in the haunting, it would make us stronger. It would make you stay. I didn't stat want you to leave me. I couldn't stat handle it. Her words were empty, hollow. She sounded more desperate than anything. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but they didn't move me. Not anymore. There was no way to wash away the truth now. The damage had already been done. I stood up and walked over to the window. The crisp autumn air was cold, but I didn't care. I needed space. I needed distance from her. I needed to think, to breathe. I had been a fool. For how long? A year? 2? Longer? I had believed in her, in the ghosts, in everything she had told me. I had let her control my thoughts, my actions. I thought she loved me. I thought we were building something together, but now I could see the cracks in everything. The lies, the manipulation, the twisted need for control. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe it was minutes, maybe hours, but when I turned back to her, I was different. The man who had stood in that kitchen, trusting her with everything, was gone. I had been replaced by someone who knew the truth, someone who wouldn't be played anymore. She tried again. Lucas, please. I shall do anything. Sorry. I was scared. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound foreign to my own ears. Scared? Is that what this is? You were scared? I shook my head, disbelieving. You said you're not the victim here, Sandra. You never were. You made me the victim. You manipulated me into a corner, and then expected me to just... The silence that followed was thick. She knew, she could feel it, the change in me. The loss of whatever affection I had left for her. I could see it in her eyes. The fear, the realization that her control was slipping away. But it wasn't just her control I was after now. It was mine. The next few days passed in a haze. I couldn't look at her without feeling disgust. Every time she spoke, I heard the lies in her voice. Every touch felt like a betrayal, but I couldn't leave. Not yet. I wasn't done. Not until I had exposed her for the liar she was. I would find a way to make her pay. The pain I felt was a sharp ache deep in my chest. But there was something else too, a fire burning inside me, fueled by every lie she had told, every whisper in the night. I wasn't just going to let her get away with this, not this time. I wasn't the one who had been haunted. I was the one who had been deceived. But that was about to change. I spent the next few days in a haze, my mind spinning, unable to focus on anything other than the betrayal that had shattered everything. But as time passed, something inside me began to change. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let Sandra walk away from this unscathed, not after everything she had done to me, to us. I needed to plan carefully. Methodically. This wasn't just about catching her in a lie. It was about taking back control, reclaiming my dignity, and forcing her to face the consequences of her actions. I wasn't alone in this. I reached out to someone who understood, a private investigator named Tony, who had once been manipulated by Sandra in a similar scam. He wasn't just any PI. He had personal experience with her tricks, her lies. Tony had been hired by Sandra once before to gather information for a different scheme, only to realize he'd been used. It had left him bitter, and he understood exactly what she was capable of. When I first spoke to him, I wasn't sure what to expect, but Tony's voice on the phone was like a breath of fresh air, grounding me. He agreed to help me immediately. He understood the stakes. Sandra had done this before, used people, manipulated them for her gain, and he wasn't going to let her get away with it again. Tell me everything, Tony said, when we met in a small, nondescript diner far from prying eyes. He was a tall man, sharp eyes under the brim of his cap. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. His focus was singular, get the job done. I leaned in, speaking in a low voice. I need proof. I need to expose her for what she sits done. I need you to track her movements, her history. I know she sits been pulling strings, playing everyone, but I need the evidence. I need to know what she sits been hiding, where she sits been going. Tony listened quietly, nodding as I explained everything. How Sandra had manipulated me with the haunting, how she'd gotten ghost hunters involved, even forged documents for the fake ghost hunting contracts she'd been paying for using our savings. She'd buried me under a mountain of lies, and I was finally starting to dig my way out. I've got connections, Tony said. I still look into her finances, her old cases. We'd still find her paper trail. You want something solid, something that will bring her down. I nodded, the weight of what was ahead starting to settle on my shoulders. The plan was in motion, and I had no intention of backing down. The next few days were a blur of activity. Tony worked behind the scenes, gathering information, tracking down receipts, and digging into Sandra's shady financial dealings. I stayed in the background, pretending everything was normal, something I was getting good at, considering how well Sandra had manipulated me before. But this time it was different. I wasn't going to be her victim anymore. One evening, Tony called me with a breakthrough. Lucas, his voice was tense, urgent. I've got it. I found the contract she forged for the ghost hunting company. It's all in the paperwork. She's been pulling this scam for months, and she's been using your savings to fund it. This is bigger than I thought. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just about the haunting. This was fraud. This was financial manipulation. My anger flared, but I stayed calm. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the evidence I needed to destroy her. Tony continued, I also found something else. Sandra had a second account, a hidden one. She said's been transferring funds to it for a while. It said's got a nice chunk of change in there, Lucas. This is the smoking gun. I sat back in my chair, the full weight of it all sinking in. Sandra had been using our joint savings to fund her lies, her manipulation. All those months of fear, of terror, had been for nothing but her gain. I had been the pawn in her twisted game, and now I had the proof. This is it, Lucas, Tony said. We duff got her. We's gonna take her down. I didn't respond at first. I couldn't. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it was all still raw. But I had a job to do. I had to make her pay for what she'd done. I took a deep breath. Let's just do this, I said, my voice steady. I want everything. Her confession, her lies. I want her to know it best over, and I want it all to come crashing down around her. Tony was silent for a moment, then replied, You said'll get it. I said'll make sure of that. The days that followed felt like a blur of action. Tony pulled every thread, dug into every hidden corner of Sandra's life, while I carefully plotted the next steps. I knew what I needed to do. Sandra had built her life on lies, on deceit. But I wasn't going to let her destroy me any longer. It wasn't just about exposing her now. It was about taking back my life, my dignity, and everything she had stolen from me. I wasn't going to let her control me any longer. I knew Sandra would never suspect what was coming. She was too sure of herself, too comfortable in her web of lies, but I was ready. The trap was set, and once I had everything I needed, once the confession tape was in place, there would be no turning back. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. And Sandra? She was about to lose everything. It felt strange, almost surreal, as I sat in the living room, the glow of the lamp casting long shadows against the walls. The house that once felt like a home now seemed like a stage, a place where the truth was about to unfold. Everything I had believed, everything I had trusted was about to be exposed. The tape recorder sat on the coffee table in front of me, as innocent as it had been when Sandra first brought it into our lives. But this time it wasn't her whispers I was about to hear. It was her confession. I had replaced the original tape with the one Tony had helped me create. The one where Sandra admitted everything, the haunting, the manipulation, the lies. I felt a strange calmness wash over me as I stared at the recorder. It was like I had crossed some invisible line. One that once crossed, there was no turning back. I had spent too long hiding from the truth, and now I was ready to face it. Sandra's fate was sealed, and there was no way she could escape it. I took a deep breath and pressed the play button. Her voice filled the room, soft at first, but growing clearer with each passing second. Lucas, I never wanted to hurt you. I was just so scared. I thought, if I could make you believe in the ghosts, you said stay. You said never leave me. I could feel the weight of her words pressing down on me, but I didn't flinch. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about justice, about giving her the same fear and uncertainty she had given me for months, the same terror that had kept me awake at night, wondering if I was losing my mind. I needed you to need me, her voice continued, pleading, desperate. I didn't set know how else to keep you here. I thought if I could make you afraid of the house, you set have to stay. I couldn't stand the thought of losing you. The more I listened, the more disgusted I became. Every word, every lie was designed to keep me locked in her web. She had used my love, my trust, my loyalty as tools to manipulate me, and now I had the proof. I paused the tape. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from anger, from the realization that I had been a fool, a willing participant in her game, but not anymore. I had everything I needed to destroy her. Every lie, every deception, now laid out in front of me. The ghost hunting contracts, the fraudulent payments, the hidden bank accounts, and now her confession. She had built her empire on lies, and I was going to bring it all crashing down. The plan was simple. I wasn't going to expose her all at once. No. I needed to make sure that when the truth came to light, it would be undeniable. She wouldn't be able to talk her way out of it. I spent the next few days setting everything in motion. I reached out to Tony again. It's Sep's time, I told him. Sep's got everything I need. The confession tape, the evidence. It's Sep's all set. Tony Sep's voice crackled with determination. We are going to hit her where it hurts. Yusef gotta be ready for the fallout, Lucas. This is going to destroy her. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. The night before I planned to confront her, I sat in the dark, listening to the tape again. Her voice was the same, broken, remorseful, desperate. But it didn't matter, there was no going back. I could already see it. The look on her face when she realized that I had everything. The shock, the fear, the disbelief. But I wasn't going to let her control me any longer. I had control now, and I was going to use it to take back everything she had stolen from me. The next day, Sandra came home from work as if nothing had changed, as if everything was normal. She was still playing her role, still pretending that nothing was wrong. She had no idea what was coming. I had already set the stage. The recorder was ready, hidden in plain sight. I had planned everything down to the smallest detail. The dinner, the conversation, the reveal. Sandra wouldn't suspect a thing. She walked into the living room and smiled as if she had won, as if everything was still under her control. Lucas, what sips for dinner tonight? I didn't respond right away. I just looked at her. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved, standing there with her fake smile, pretending to be the same person I had known for years. It made my blood boil. Dinner sep's ready, I said. My voice steady, colder than I sept ever heard it before. But I think we need to talk first. She looked at me, confusion flashing in her eyes. I stood up, walked over to the recorder, and placed it in front of her. About everything. Her eyes darted between me and the recorder, a flash of panic in her eyes. She could sense it now, the shift. The moment when everything she had built was about to crumble. Yusuf lied to me, Sandra, I said quietly. For months, and it's Sep's over. I pressed play. Her confession filled the room again. But this time she wasn't in control. This time the truth was out. She froze, her face going white as her own voice echoed through the room, exposing her for who she truly was. There was no acting her way out of this. No way to explain it away. The guilt was written all over her face. I didn't say a word. I just watched. The silence was deafening. The room was suffocating. I could feel the weight of Sandra's disbelief hanging in the air like a storm cloud, ready to burst. Her eyes were wide with shock, her mouth opening and closing as if she couldn't find the words to defend herself. It was almost pathetic the way she faltered. But I didn't feel pity. I felt vindication. She had used me for months, manipulating my love, my trust, turning me into a pawn in her twisted game. She had built a house of lies, and I was the one who had been trapped inside. But now, the tables had turned. Sandra didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just about exposing her. This was about making sure she never got the chance to control anyone else again. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not with me. Not with anyone. Lucas, please, she said, her voice trembling, her hands shaking as she reached for the recorder. You don't understand. I was scared. I was so scared of losing you. I didn't answer her right away. I just stared at her, watching her struggle to piece together the broken facade she'd built. The woman I had known, the woman I thought I loved. She was gone. All that was left was the cold, calculated liar who had played me for a fool. She looked at the recorder, then back at me, her eyes pleading. You don't have to do this. You don't have to destroy me like this. I've said I'll fix it. We can fix this, Lucas. We can fix everything. I couldn't help but laugh. It was hollow, bitter. Fix it after everything? You thought you could just lie your way out of this, Sandra? My voice was steady, cutting. You used me. You manipulated me for your own selfish gain. And you thought I wouldn't notice? You thought I'd just let it go? She froze, the words dying on her lips. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her, almost. But the anger and betrayal burned too deeply. I had been blind. I had allowed her to destroy my peace, to ruin my trust. She had made me doubt myself, and I would never let her do that again. I took a step toward her, my eyes never leaving hers. You've been living in this world of lies for so long, Sandra, but now it's time for the truth to come out. You've hurt me, and you've hurt so many others. You need to face it. Her eyes filled with panic, and she took a step back, as if she could run from the consequences. But there was nowhere to go. The evidence was irrefutable. The confession tape, the fraudulent contracts, the bank records. I had it all, and I wasn't about to let her manipulate me again. She tried to gather herself, straightening her posture, but the cracks were too visible. I don't set know what you think you're going to do, Lucas. You think this will ruin me? You think you can just walk away from this? Her voice was growing more desperate, but I was done listening to her excuses. This isn't set about me, Sandra. This is about you facing the consequences. I set them done being your victim. You set'll have to answer for what you set of done, for every lie you set of told, for every person you set of manipulated. I could see the realization dawning on her. The fear in her eyes deepened, and for the first time I saw her as the small, scared woman she truly was. She had been using fear as a weapon for so long, but now it was her turn to feel it. Please, she begged, her voice breaking. I said make it right. Just don't do this to me. I love you, Lucas. I I cut her off. Love? Is that what you call this? Using someone sep's love to control them? You don't seps know what love is. Not anymore. You was twisted it into something ugly. I turned away, the finality of my words settling in the room like a heavy stone. There was no going back now. The damage was done, and Sandra was going to have to face it. I wasn't the only one who had been duped. There was a trail of people she had hurt, of lives she had destroyed to feed her own insecurity. But now it was time for her to be held accountable. And I wasn't going to be the one to protect her anymore. Lucas, please, she cried again, her voice breaking. I never meant for it to get this far. Please. I shall do anything. I didn't respond. I just walked over to the phone, my hands steady as I dialed the number. Tony was on the other end before it even finished ringing. It's time, I said, my voice calm but firm. We start going to make sure this ends tonight. I could hear Tony Sepso's voice on the other end, filled with determination. I Sepso got everything ready. I Sepso meet you at the courthouse in the morning. It's Seps over for her. I didn't even acknowledge Sandra's pleas anymore. I was done. She had gotten away with too much for too long, and now it was time for the world to see her for who she truly was. The woman who had used me. The woman who had used everyone to climb higher. And as I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. It was over. I had the truth, and now I was going to expose it. Sandra had no idea what was coming next. She thought she had control, but now she was the one who would lose everything. The days leading up to the final confrontation felt like an eternity. Every moment was filled with a mix of anticipation and dread, but there was no turning back. I had everything I needed. Every lie, every manipulation, every twisted moment of control Sandra had exercised over me. And now the clock was ticking. The trap was set. It was time for her to face the consequences. I stayed calm. Every time I saw Sandra, I kept my composure, but inside my mind was a storm. The quiet moments with her when she thought everything was fine were the hardest. How could she stand there pretending like she hadn't ruined everything? Every smile she gave me felt like a slap in the face. But I didn't show it. I couldn't. If I slipped now, it would all fall apart. I had to wait for the right moment. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Every night we spent in fear. Her fear, my fear, was a lie. Every time I reached out for comfort, she had been controlling me, playing me like a puppet, and now it was time for her to pay. Sandra hadn't changed. She continued to weave her web of manipulation, trying to keep me off balance, pretending that everything was normal. But I could see the cracks. She was slipping. I could feel her desperation rising as the days passed, and I knew it wouldn't be long before her mask would fall completely. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just going to expose her. I was going to make sure she felt the weight of everything she had done. Every lie, every fake ghostly encounter, every fraudulent contract. I was going to use it all to destroy her. There was something satisfying about the way she didn't suspect a thing. She still thought I was blind. Still thought I was the same Lucas who had stood by her, who had believed in the ghosts, in the haunted house. But she was wrong. I had seen through her, and now I was playing my part in this game. But this time I was in control. I spent hours preparing, going over the details again and again. I made sure everything was perfect. The confession tape was in place, the documents were ready, and Tony had all the legal steps lined up. We were ready to go public. Then the day arrived. It was just a few days before Christmas. The air was crisp, the world outside blanketed in snow. It should have been a time for peace, for family, but instead it felt like everything was building to a breaking point. Sandra had no idea that this would be her last Christmas in our home. Her last night pretending to be the woman I thought I knew. That evening, as we sat at the dinner table, the weight of the moment hit me. Every bite of food felt heavy. Every conversation seemed meaningless. Sandra chatted about her day, about nothing important, but I could hear her voice false and empty. I could see the cracks in her facade, the little cracks she couldn't hide. She was getting nervous. I could feel it. I knew this would be the night. She had no idea, but I had planned everything down to the last detail. The family was coming over the next day, and I knew she would be expecting a normal holiday. But this was going to be her wake-up call. When dinner was finished, I stood up, excusing myself from the table. Sandra followed me into the living room, her eyes flicking to the recorder on the coffee table. She didn't say anything, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw tightened. "I need to show you something," I said, my voice steady. It was time. I could feel the anticipation building in my chest. Sandra frowned. "What is it, Lucas?" I didn't answer. Instead, I reached over and pressed play on the recorder. Her voice filled the room. "I needed you to need me," she said, the words almost making me sick. "I didn't set know how else to keep you here. I thought if I could make you afraid of the house, you set have to stay. I couldn't set stand the thought of losing you." Her confession played out, each word digging deeper into the wound. But Sandra wasn't listening to the tape anymore. She was staring at me, her face a mix of fear and confusion. "No, no," she whispered. "Lucas, please. You don't understand. I never meant to hurt you. I just—" I stopped her with a sharp motion of my hand. "You used me, Sandra. You used my fear, my love, to manipulate me. You've been doing this for months, and I was too blind to see it." She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't let her. "I've got everything. The contracts, the bank transfers, the hidden accounts, and now your confession. It sets all here, all of it. And you can talk your way out of it this time." Sandra's eyes darted to the recorder, her face going pale as she processed what I was saying. Her facade was gone now. Her control, the thing she had held over me for so long, was slipping through her fingers. "I can fix this," she said quickly, her voice rising in panic. "I said I'll fix everything, Lucas. Please, just give me a chance." But I was done listening to her excuses. "There's nothing to fix anymore, Sandra. The truth is out. You can control me anymore. You can control anyone. It's over." She took a step back, her hands trembling. "Lucas, please." But I was already moving toward the door. "You said you're done, Sandra, and tomorrow everyone will know who you really are. The fraud, the liar, the manipulator." The last thing I saw before I left the room was her face. Her once confident, calculated expression had crumbled, leaving behind only fear. But that fear wasn't for her. It was for everything she had built, everything she had stolen, crumbling down around her. And I walked out knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. The morning of Christmas Eve came with a bitter chill in the air. Snow had started to blanket the ground, making the world outside look like something out of a dream. Inside, though, the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. The house felt heavy, thick with tension. Sandra's facade had crumbled the night before, and today the world would finally see who she truly was. I had made my peace. There was no going back now. Today would be the day I exposed everything. The lies, the manipulation, the control, and the best part. She had no idea what was coming. I had arranged everything carefully. My attorney Tony, the private investigator who had helped me, and even a couple of trusted friends, all were in place, ready for the final act. Sandra thought it was just another holiday gathering, another dinner with the family, another chance to pretend that everything was okay. But I knew better. Today, everything would change. The family started trickling in around noon, just as planned. The house filled with noise, laughter, and the usual holiday chaos. But all I could hear was the quiet pounding of my heart. I kept my composure, greeting everyone with a smile, playing my role. Sandra was still on edge, but she hid it well. She was doing everything she could to keep the conversation light, to keep people distracted, but I could see the cracks. She wasn't as sure of herself anymore. She could feel the tension in the air, even if no one else could. By the time dinner rolled around, everything was set. The recorder was hidden in plain sight, just as it had been the night before. But this time I wasn't just going to press play in the quiet of our living room. No. Today, everyone would hear it. Everyone would know the truth. As we sat down at the table, Sandra tried to take control of the conversation, steering it away from anything that might make her uncomfortable. But I wasn't about to let her dictate this moment. I wasn't going to let her get away with it anymore. Before we eat, I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the table, I have something I want to share with everyone. Sandra's eyes flickered to me, her face turning pale. She could sense what was coming, but she still didn't fully understand the depth of the trap I had set. You've all heard about the haunting, I continued, keeping my voice steady, the whispers in the house, the strange noises. I know many of you thought it was just a ghost, something beyond our control, but I've come to realize that it wasn't a ghost at all. It was a lie created by someone in this very room. There was a stunned silence around the table. Everyone stopped talking, eyes turning toward me. I could see Sandra stiffen, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, but she said nothing. I could feel the air in the room grow thick, but I wasn't done. I've been manipulated for months. I said, my gaze never leaving Sandra Sips. The house wasn't Sept haunted. Sandra, my wife, used a recorder to create those ghostly noises. She made me believe in something that didn't exist, all for her own gain. I paused, letting the words hang in the air, before I pressed play on the recorder sitting at the end of the table. The same voice filled the room, and I saw Sandra Sip's face twist in horror as her own words echoed back at her. I needed you to need me, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't know how else to keep you here. The room went completely silent. The look on Sandra's face was one of sheer panic. She didn't know how to react. Her entire world, the control she had so carefully built, was falling apart in front of everyone. I kept my eyes on her, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. This was the moment. The moment she would realize that no one was on her side anymore. The moment her manipulation would be exposed for what it was. I have everything, I continued, my voice steady now. The contracts, the bank transfers, the fraudulent ghost hunting services, all of it. But this is the final proof. This is the truth. Sandra stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Lucas, please, she cried, her voice trembling with desperation. This isn't Septet what you think. You have to understand. But I cut her off, my voice growing firmer. No, Sandra, you don't get to explain this away. Not anymore. The truth is out, and it sets time for everyone to know who you really are. Her face was a mix of disbelief and rage. Now, she couldn't deny it. The evidence was too overwhelming, the tape too damning. She tried to laugh it off, to regain some semblance of control, but no one was buying it. I could see it in the eyes of the people around the table. They were all looking at her differently now. The mask had fallen. You think you can just run away from this, Sandra? I asked, my tone darkening. You said been living a lie, manipulating me, manipulating everyone in this room. And now it sets over. Sandra Sip's eyes darted around the room, her panic rising. She tried to grab the recorder, but I pulled it back, holding it firmly in my hand. This is yours, I said quietly. and it seeps over. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. No one spoke, no one moved. The weight of the moment was pressing down on all of us. I wasn't sure how long it lasted, but when Sandra finally spoke again, her voice was small, broken. I didn't set know how else to keep you. I thought if I could make you afraid, you stay. I just wanted you to love me. The words felt hollow now, empty. There was nothing she could say to undo what she had done. As I looked around the table, I knew the truth had been laid bare. The room would never be the same. Sandra had lost everything. And as for me, I had reclaimed my life. The room was suffocating. Every eye in the house was on Sandra, and I could feel the weight of their gaze as they watched her crumble. For the first time, she wasn't the confident, manipulative woman who had controlled me for so long. No, now she was exposed, vulnerable, broken, and lost. And I couldn't help but feel a strange satisfaction as I watched her world fall apart. Sandra's face was pale, her hands trembling as she tried to gather herself. She glanced around the room, her eyes flicking between the family members who had once trusted her. But there was no escaping it now. The truth was out. She had spent so long building a web of lies. But now it was all coming down around her. Sandra started, her voice cracking. I didn't mean for this to happen. I never meant to hurt anyone. But her words fell flat. The damage was already done. Everyone had heard the confession. They had seen the evidence. They knew what she had done, and there was no way she could talk her way out of it. I didn't speak. I just watched her, letting the silence hang in the air, heavy with the weight of everything she had done. It was like she was waiting for someone to save her, but no one was coming. The people around the table, our family, the friends who had once been by her side, were looking at her differently now. There was no trust left, no sympathy. The mask had fallen, and what was left was the reality of who Sandra really was. And I didn't know what else to do, she whispered, her voice small now, desperate. I was scared, Lucas. I thought if I could just make you stay, I thought you leave me. Her words sounded weak, almost pitiful, but I didn't feel sorry for her, not anymore. She had created a life of fear and manipulation, all in the name of control, and now she was facing the consequences. You destroyed everything, Sandra, I said, my voice steady, but the words hit her like a punch. You destroyed us. You destroyed our family. And for what? A lie? A lie you built on fear and deceit? I can just forgive you for that. She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. The tears were flowing now, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I had lived in fear of her for months, wondering if I was losing my mind, and she had been the one behind it all. She had made me doubt myself, made me question my reality, and now I was done. I turned to the others, the people who had been a part of this twisted game without even knowing it. You all heard her, I said, my voice carrying across the room. This is who she really is. This is what she's been doing behind closed doors. And now it's time for everyone to know. Sandra tried to speak again, but the words didn't come out. She was too broken, too defeated. She had lost. There was no escape from the truth. The fallout was swift. The family members who had once trusted her were now pulling away, their faces filled with disbelief and disgust. Some of them got up from the table, muttering quietly to each other. Others just stared at her, unsure of what to say. The woman they had once thought they knew was gone, replaced by the person who had been pulling the strings from behind the scenes. I stood in the corner of the room, watching it all unfold. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about justice. It was about making sure that Sandra's lies were exposed for what they were. And it was about giving back the peace that she had stolen from me. Piece by piece. Sandra tried to grab my arm, her grip weak and desperate. Lucas, please, you can just leave me like this. You can just expose me like this. I shook her off gently. You did this to yourself. You made your choices, Sandra. Now you have to live with them. The guilt, the fear, the shame, it was all written on her face. But I didn't feel anything for her anymore. I didn't owe her anything. The woman who had broken me had been exposed, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. As the hours passed, the family slowly filtered out. Some left quietly, others whispered in hushed tones, too shocked to speak. But Sandra remained where she was, sitting on the edge of the sofa, her head hung low. She didn't try to speak to me again. She didn't try to explain. There was nothing left to say. I could feel the weight of everything settling on me. The truth had come out, and now I had to let it go. I had to move forward. Sandra had done enough damage. She had manipulated me for too long, but that was over now. In the silence of the house, I realized something. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about freedom. I had taken back control of my life. I had exposed the lies, and now I was free. It's strange how quiet the house became after the chaos, the aftermath of everything Sandra had done. The lies, the manipulation, the fraud hung in the air like a fog that refused to lift. I had walked away from her, leaving her there to deal with the consequences of her actions. But the truth didn't just destroy her, it destroyed everything. The trust, the family, the life we had built. It all came crashing down, and there was no fixing it. The first time I walked into the house after that night, everything felt different. The walls, the rooms, the very air seemed tainted by what had happened. It was as if the space itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to change. I had spent so many months, so many years trapped in the web. Sandra had woven around me, but now I was free. The weight I had carried for so long was finally gone, and yet there was still this hollow feeling, this emptiness that lingered. Was it anger, regret, or was it just the quiet aftermath of a life shattered by lies? I sat in the living room staring at the space we had once shared. There was a strange sense of relief in knowing that Sandra would have to answer for everything she had done. The fraud, the manipulation, the emotional abuse. She would have to face the consequences, just like anyone else who crosses that line. The legal process was slow, but it was moving forward. My attorney Tony had already started gathering evidence for the case against her. She was being investigated for multiple counts of fraud and emotional abuse. And most importantly, the confession tape. The one that had exposed her for the manipulator she truly was the final nail in the coffin. Sandra had tried to fight it. She tried to claim that I was exaggerating, that I was just trying to ruin her life. But the truth was undeniable. The evidence was stacked against her, and no amount of pleading or manipulation could change that. In the weeks that followed, I started to get the sense that Sandra had underestimated me. She thought she could control me forever, but in the end it was her own lies that brought her down. The irony of it wasn't lost on me. She had built this entire empire of deception, and now it was collapsing around her piece by piece. But it wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't even about making Sandra pay for what she had done to me. It was about justice. It was about making sure she never got the chance to hurt anyone again. And in that sense, I had won. One evening, I sat down to review the legal documents Tony had sent me. There was an air of finality to it all. The court dates, the legal charges, the list of witnesses who would testify against Sandra. It was all happening, slowly but surely, and I felt a deep sense of satisfaction as I read through the papers. She would have to face the consequences of her actions. She wouldn't be able to talk her way out of this one. I wasn't sure what the future held for me. I wasn't sure if I could ever fully rebuild the trust I had lost, not just in Sandra but in people in general. But I knew one thing for sure: I had reclaimed my life. I had taken back my power, my dignity, and my peace of mind. As the days passed, I saw Sandra's world start to crumble. Her business, which she had built on lies, began to fall apart. People who had once supported her started to back away, seeing her for who she truly was. The weight of her actions started to sink in, and there was no escaping it. The truth had a way of doing that, of pulling the rug out from under you and exposing everything you had tried to hide. But as I watched it all unfold, I realized that the justice wasn't just in the courtrooms or the legal proceedings. It was in the peace I felt inside, knowing that I had done the right thing. I had exposed the lies, and I had taken control of my own story. For the first time in months, I could breathe. The last time I saw Sandra was in the courtroom. Her eyes were red, her face drawn and hollow. She had lost everything: her business, her reputation, her control. But she didn't seem to care. There was no remorse in her eyes, no apology, just defiance. But that defiance didn't matter. The truth was out, and now it was her turn to face the consequences of her actions. The court's verdict came a few days later, guilty. Sandra was sentenced to pay restitution for the fraud she had committed, and she would face legal charges for emotional abuse. Her business was shut down, and she would spend the next few years trying to rebuild her life from the wreckage she had caused. As I left the courthouse that day, I felt a sense of relief, but it wasn't the victory I had expected. It was more like closure. The chapter with Sandra was finally over, and I could finally move forward. In the end, the truth had set me free. It had taken time, but I had found justice, not in revenge, but in reclaiming what was mine, my dignity, my peace, and my future. As I sit here now, in the quiet aftermath of everything, I can't help but reflect on how far I've come. It feels almost surreal, like the weight of everything that happened has finally lifted, and I can finally breathe again. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, it all feels like a distant memory, one that doesn't haunt me anymore. It's strange how time works. You go through something so earth-shattering, and yet eventually the pain dulls. The scars remain, but they stop feeling so raw. I never thought I'd be here, looking back on all of it with this strange sense of peace. For so long, I had been consumed by the need for revenge, for justice. But now, as I sit in this house that once felt like a prison, I realize that the real victory wasn't in making Sandra pay. It was in reclaiming myself, in taking back my life, my peace of mind. The truth had set me free, but it wasn't just the truth about Sandra. It was the truth about myself. The truth that I didn't need to be a victim anymore. I didn't need to let her, or anyone else, define who I was or what I could be. I had spent so long doubting myself, questioning my reality. But now I see things clearly, and the clarity feels like a weight lifted off my shoulders. It's strange, really. The last few months have been a whirlwind. The courtroom, the confrontation, the fallout. It all happened so quickly. But now everything has settled. Sandra's fate has been sealed. She's facing the consequences of her actions, and I'm finally free to move forward. I used to think that justice was about revenge, about making someone pay for the wrongs they've done to you. But now I realize it's more than that. It's about finding peace. It's about reclaiming what was taken from you and using it to build something better. The truth isn't just about exposing someone's lies. It's about restoring balance, about putting things right. As I think about everything that happened, I can't help but feel a strange sense of gratitude. Not for Sandra or for what she did, but for the strength I found within myself. For the person I became through this whole ordeal. I didn't know it at the time, but this was the journey I needed to go on. It was the only way I could find the courage to face the truth and the courage to let go of the pain. Sandra lost everything. Her business, her reputation, her control. But in the end, it wasn't about her losing. It was about me finding myself again. The truth that had once felt like a heavy burden to carry, now felt like a badge of honor. I had faced the darkness, and I had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and free. I look back on the days when I thought I was losing my mind, when I thought the ghosts were real, when I was so trapped in my own fear and doubt, and I realized just how far I've come. The man who stood in that kitchen confronting Sandra was a different man than the one who had walked into this house months ago. He was someone who had finally found the strength to say no, to stand up for himself, to take control of his own life. And that's what freedom is. It's not just about escaping the lies or exposing the truth. It's about finding the strength to live your life on your own terms without fear, without doubt. It's about reclaiming your own story. As for Sandra, I know she'll never truly understand what she did. She'll never fully grasp the damage she caused. But that's not my problem anymore. She's not my burden to carry. I've let go of the anger, the pain, and the fear. I've let go of her. I used to think I would never be able to move on from this, that the betrayal would haunt me forever. But now I see it for what it was. A chapter in my life that had to end, and now I'm free to write the next one. The truth has set me free, and in the end, that's all that matters. It's been months now, and life is quieter. The chaos has died down, and the weight that once hung over me has lifted. I don't think I'll ever forget what happened, what Sandra did, what she took from me. But as time passes, I realize that the biggest thing she took wasn't just my trust, it was my peace. And now, I'm finally starting to reclaim it. I remember the day the court verdict came through, how surreal it all felt. The paperwork, the lawyers, the courtroom full of people. It all felt like a blur, like I was watching someone else's life unfold before my eyes. But when the judge handed down the verdict, when Sandra was sentenced for her crimes, I realized something. This wasn't just about punishment. It wasn't just about her being held accountable. It was about the finality. The closure. Sandra had spent years building a web of lies, and in the end it was those lies that destroyed her. She had created this false reality for me, one that I believed in for so long. But the truth, it's powerful, and it's liberating. I won't lie, it wasn't easy, moving on from everything. Some days the memories still creep up on me. The nights spent awake listening to whispers in the house, thinking I was losing my mind. The constant fear that I couldn't escape. Those days aren't completely gone, but they're fading. With every passing day, I feel more and more like myself again. More like the man I used to be before Sandra's lies took root in my life. I still see the people Sandra hurt. I still hear the whispers of how she manipulated others just like she manipulated me. It's hard not to feel sorry for them, for the damage she caused. But the truth is, they're moving on too. Slowly but surely, and I'm starting to realize that it wasn't just Sandra who needed to heal. It was me too. I've made peace with it. With her, with everything. I didn't know how much I needed it until I started to feel it. The weight lifting from my chest. The anger, the resentment, they're still there, but they're not as powerful as they used to be. It's like the first time you take a deep breath after holding it in for too long. That's what it feels like to let go of the past, to truly move on. It's not perfect. There are days when I wake up and the memories rush back, and I wonder if it was all a dream. But it's real. It happened. And I've learned to accept it as part of my story. It doesn't define me. It doesn't define who I am or who I'm becoming. The hardest part was realizing that Sandra never truly understood the extent of what she did. She never understood the damage she caused. Maybe she never will, but that's not my burden to carry anymore. She's paying for what she did, and now I'm living my life again. I've started doing things I hadn't in a long time. Little things. Things that used to make me happy. I've reconnected with old friends, gone on walks in the park, spent quiet afternoons just reading a book. For the first time in a while, I feel like I'm actually living again, not just surviving. I've also learned to trust again, not just other people, but myself. I doubted myself for so long, wondering if I was losing my mind, if I was being paranoid. But I wasn't. I wasn't crazy. I just had to trust my instincts. I had to trust that the truth would come out, even if it took time. The hardest part is seeing Sandra's name in the paper, hearing the stories of how she's trying to rebuild her life. It's not the life she had before. People talk about her differently now. There's no respect left. And maybe that's what hurts her the most. Knowing that the control she had over everyone, over me, is gone. She's facing the consequences. Just like she should. And that's justice. As for me, I've learned something valuable through this whole ordeal. I've learned that sometimes justice isn't about what happens in a courtroom. It's about what happens in your own heart. It's about letting go of the anger, the resentment, and taking back your peace. That's the real victory. I'm moving forward slowly, but I'm moving. And I know that no matter what happens, I'll be okay. I have my life back, my peace, and I won't let anything take that from me again. Time has a strange way of healing wounds. Or maybe it's just that we learn how to live with them. I've moved on, found a new sense of peace, but there's something about the finality of everything that still lingers. Every now and then I find myself thinking about Sandra, about what happened. I guess some things never truly leave you. But that's not to say I haven't found my closure. A few months after the court case, I received an unexpected message. An email from Sandra. I wasn't sure what to expect, but something about it caught my attention. I opened it. It was short. I never meant for any of this to happen, but I said, "Sorry, Lucas. I hope one day you can forgive me. There was a part of me that wanted to write back, to tell her exactly what I thought of her, but I didn't. It wasn't worth it. She'd already faced the consequences. The truth had come out. She had nothing left to say that would change anything. The woman who once held so much power over me was now a ghost in my past, and I intended to keep it that way. But there was one last thing that struck me. That final line, I hope one day you can forgive me. Forgive her? Maybe. But I realized something important in that moment. I had already forgiven her. I didn't need to send her a message. I didn't need her forgiveness or her apology. I had already found peace. I had moved on, and holding on to that last piece of anger, that last bit of resentment, wasn't going to serve me anymore. The irony of it all hit me as I sat there staring at the screen. Sandra had spent all that time trying to control me, manipulate me, and in the end she had only destroyed herself. The thing that she had feared the most, losing me, had happened because of her own actions. She thought she could manipulate me into staying, into loving her. But in the end she had given me the freedom I'd needed all along. It was almost laughable now, the way she had twisted everything, trying to convince me that I was the problem. But the truth was, I wasn't the one who had been lost. She was. She had been so desperate to keep me that she had lost sight of who she was. And in doing so, she lost everything. I learned that the most powerful thing you can do is let go. Let go of the anger. Let go of the hurt. Let go of the person who wronged you. I didn't need to get revenge, or even get closure from Sandra. The closure came from within. The day I decided to stop letting her have control over me was the day I took back my life. But the final irony didn't end there. A few weeks later, I saw Sandra's name again, this time in a headline. She was trying to make a comeback, using the same tactics she had always used. The media called it the redemption story, a tale of a woman trying to rebuild her life after everything had come crashing down. But there was something about it that felt hollow. The irony of it all was that, in trying to rebuild, she was doing exactly what she had done before, manipulating the narrative to suit her own needs. She wasn't seeking redemption, she was seeking control again. And the truth was, no one was buying it. I've learned that people don't change unless they're ready. Sandra hadn't changed. She hadn't learned from her mistakes. She was still trying to manipulate the story, still trying to regain the control she had lost. But it was too late. The world had already seen who she was. And in the end, it wasn't about her story anymore. It was about mine. I don't know what the future holds for me. Maybe I'll meet someone new. Maybe I'll keep building my life, brick by brick. But I know one thing for sure, I've found my peace. And that's all that matters. Sandra can try to rewrite her story, but she can't change the truth. The truth is what set me free. And that's something no one can take from me.